Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeff Murrin continuing the conversation of the Scarlet Letter. I'm using specifically the Barnes & Noble Classics Edition. Can't talk. Not a good start. Not that it really matters necessarily because they all give us the same information, but just so you know where I am, and maybe it'll be easier for you to follow along if you have the same edition. I'm going to cover in this particular video chapters 7, 8, and 9, the Governor's Hall, and then the Elf Child and the Minister, and then the Leech, ending up with the Leech. All right. So what we have here in chapter 7, the Governor's Hall, it says, Hester Prynne went one day to the mansion of Governor Bellingham with a pair of gloves she had fringed and embroidered to his order, and which were to be worn on some great occasion of state. Okay, so again, if you remember, she was very talented in her work with fabrics and with sewing. All right, and this is such a her talent was so great that people all over wanted to her product. Okay, but remember, no one would allow her stuff to be used in weddings. Okay, so that's very interesting. All right, but I'm going to go about the second sentence into the next paragraph, the second paragraph, where it says, it had reached her ears, her being Hester, of course, that there was a design on the part of some of the leading inhabitants, cherishing the more rigid order of principles in religion and government, to deprive her of her child, to take Pearl away from her, on the supposition that Pearl, as already hinted, was of demon origin. Okay, she was born in sin, so therefore she is evil. Okay, these good people not unreasonably argued that a Christian interest in the mother's soul required them to remove such a stumbling block from her path. So it's as if Pearl, the child, is a stumbling block, getting in the way of Hester's better life, her salvation, as it were. All right, so it's this child that is causing her all this difficulty. All right. Said if the child, on the other hand, were really capable of moral and religious growth and possessed the elements of ultimate salvation, then surely it would enjoy all of the fairer prospect of these advantages by being transferred to wiser and better guardianship than Hester Prynne. So they believe it's going to be a win-win, right? It's going to free up Hester so that she can have the more noble, spiritual, religious pursuits, and it's going to be a better situation for the child not to be causing such a disruption. All right. In the following paragraph, about midway through, I'm going to start reading here. It says, we have spoken of Pearl's rich and luxuriant beauty, a beauty that shone with deep and vivid tints, a bright complexion, eyes possessing intensity both of deep and glow, and hair already of a deep, glossy brown, in which, in after years, would be nearly akin to black. Of course it would, right? There was fire in her and throughout her, and she seemed the unpremeditated offshoot of a passionate moment, really driving this home. That she was born in passion, that she was born in the fire that was within Hester, and therefore she embodies it. She looks at it, she says it. But remember how those people were described, the regular folks who were watching Pearl and Hester when she was up on the scaffold. Remember that, right? They were of a worn out, whatever, and then Hester was described, as similar to the Virgin Mary. Now we have this beautiful, luxurious, hair and whatnot. All right. Beginning of the next paragraph. But it was a remarkable attribute of this garb, because Hester, in all of her talent, has created this particular dress for Pearl. All right, it's a fiery red. It's like a deep red with gold threading all throughout. All right, so it's this remarkably bright. remember in the very first, one lady wanted to give some old worn out flannel for Hester to make the A, but now she's dressed this child up, this demon child, everybody believes, in bright, fiery red. All right. But it was a remarkable attribute of this garb, and indeed of the child's whole appearance, that it irresistibly and inevitably reminded the beholder of the token which Hester Prynne was doomed to wear upon her bosom. It was the Scarlet Letter in another form. Remember, red letter A with all the gold needlework therein, and so is exactly what Pearl is wearing to go see the governor. It's interesting. It's like she is that A, that symbol personified. It goes on just to end there saying, the Scarlet Letter endowed with life. In the very last sentence of that paragraph, had Hester contrived so perfectly to represent the Scarlet Letter in her appearance. All right, so there you go. All right, skipping a paragraph. There is a, let's see, it says, there are people that come up on them as they're walking. All right, it's people that come up on Pearl and Hester. And someone says, behold, verily, there is the woman of the Scarlet Letter, and of a truth moreover, there is the likeness of the Scarlet Letter running along by her side. Come, therefore, and let us fling mud at them. Well, that's a very kind Christian way of handling people, isn't it? Hey, there's that person we don't like. Let's throw mud. All right. But Pearl, get this, but Pearl, who was a dauntless child, after frowning, stamping her foot, and shaking her little hand with a variety of threatening gestures, suddenly made a rush at the knot of her enemies, and put them all to fright. She resembled, in her fierce pursuit of them, an infant pestilence, the scarlet fever, or some such half-fledged angel of judgment, whose mission was to punish the sins of the rising generations. She screamed and shouted, too, with a terrific volume of sound, which doubtless caused the hearts of the fugitives to quake within them. The victory accomplished, Pearl returned quietly to her mother and looked up, smiling at her face. See what I did, Mom? I put those people right in their place. All right. Skipping a few paragraphs, I'm going to read the paragraph next. It says, nevertheless, I will enter. Okay. She goes, she's greeted at the door of the governor's house, and they said, he's in a meeting. Hester says, nevertheless, I will enter, answered Hester Prynne with the bond servant, perhaps judging from the decision of her air and the glittering symbol in her bosom that she was a great lady in the land, and offered no opposition. So Hester just says, hey, I'm coming in. I'm going to come on in. And this person sees this fine design on her, on the front of her dress there. Sees the fine, beautiful, creation that her daughter is wearing and thinks, wow, this person must be someone special. She's dressed like that. Totally clueless of the situation, what actually it is that causes her to be dressed like that. Okay, so she's waiting to meet with the governor. She sees her reflection in a suit of armor and sees Pearl in it too. They're both distorted. The letter A is distorted and Pearl is distorted. That's an interesting image that we have there in that. All right. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Okay, just keep in mind the way this child is dressed and the way people treated her on the way and the way she handled those people and the way she keeps being described as somebody who is born of a certain passion and how she lives and embodies that certain passion. All right, so there you go. We're going to see what happens as they talk with the governor and some other characters here in the next chapter. All right. All right, chapter 8, the elf child and the minister. All right, now we're going to see a callback of some cast of characters. Yes, there's Governor Bellingham. Yes, there is Hester Prynne. And yes, there is Pearl. But there is also the Reverend Dimmesdale and Roger Chillingworth. So if you think about it, the people who were on the scaffold, Pearl and Hester, and the person questioning her, Reverend Dimmesdale, all right? and also Roger Chillingworth. And Chillingworth, in the meantime, Chillingworth and Dimmesdale have kind of have this interesting relationship that has developed, and we'll take a look at that. All right. I'm going to begin on what is my page 91. All right, and this is the Behind the Governor and Mr. Wilson, that particular chapter. It says here that it was understood that this learned man, Roger Chillingworth, this learned man was the physician as well as friend of the young minister. So the young minister we see has been ailing. He's not doing that well physically. All right, and because Chillingworth, has his medical degree or his medical experience and has been in the woods, the forest, or whatever with the Native Americans, learning their thing too, their medicine practices. He has cultivated a relationship with, the two have cultivated a relationship with one another, and Dimmesdale has taken Chillingworth on. Chillingworth, Hester's former husband, has taken him on as his own physician. But think about this really quickly, though. Okay, Dimmesdale has no idea that this is Hester Prynne. His own parishioners has no idea that this is her former husband. All right, because remember that was don't tell anybody. All right, and Hester Prynne hasn't said anything, so he doesn't. Dimmesdale does not fully understand the connection between Hester and Roger Chillingworth. Does not know that Roger Chillingworth, yes, is a physician, whatever that means in Boston at this particular time, but also that he has no idea that Roger Chillingworth really wants to get to the bottom at all costs, get to the bottom of who Pearl's father is. All right. So I'm going to begin at the paragraph that begins, "What have we here?" said Governor Bellingham, looking with surprise at the scarlet little figure before him, looking at Pearl. All right. "I profess I have never seen the like since my days of vanity in old King James's time, when I was wont to esteem it a high favor to be admitted to a court masque. There used to be a swarm of these small apparitions in holy time, and we called them the children of the Lord of Misrule. But how gat such a guest into my hall?" All right. It says, "What a little bird of scarlet plumage, what little bird of scarlet plumage may this be?" Like, who is this child? Ending that paragraph, it says, "Art thou a Christian, child?" Asking Pearl straightforward, "Are you a Christian, Pearl?" Okay, and we know how Pearl is of her own mind, right? It says, "Art thou a Christian, child? Ha! Dost know thy catechism? Or art thou one of those naughty elves or fairies whom we thought to have left behind us with other relics of papistry in merry old England?" Okay, so are you a good Christian, or are you a relic of the Catholic Church? Okay, implying that the Catholics, the papists, are not true Christians, and we left those behind to come here to start our own Christian utopia. All right. "I am my mother's child," answered the scarlet vision, "and my name is Pearl." "Pearl? Ruby, rather, or coral, or red rose at the very least, judging from thy hue," responded the old minister, putting forth his hand in a vain attempt to pat the little Pearl on the cheek. "But where is this mother of thine? Ah, I see," he added, and turning to the Governor Bellingham whispered, "This is the self-same child of whom we have held speech together, and behold, here the unhappy woman, Hester Prynne, her mother." Oh, convenient. We've just been talking about these two, and here they are right before us. Skipping a little bit. "Hester Prynne," said he, fixing his naturally stern regard on the wearer of the Scarlet Letter, "there hath been much question concerning thee of late. The point hath been weightily discussed, whether we, that our authority and influence do well discharge our consciences by trusting an immortal soul, such as there is in yonder child, to the guidance of one who hath stumbled and fallen amid the pitfalls of this world. So are you fit to be a mother? See how you have stumbled already? And she, Pearl herself, is the result of your stumbling. Are you fit to be a mother? Are you going to continue to stumble and do so before this child? Is this child causing you more grief and more pain, perhaps? Whatever, but is this a right relationship that you have going on? It says, speak thou the child's own mother. Were it not, thinkest thou for thy little one's temporal and eternal welfare, that she be taken out of thy charge, and clad soberly, okay, dressed in normal, not flashy clothes like these here, and disciplined strictly? Remember, Hester was not much of a disciplinarian. And instructed in the truths of heaven and earth? What canst thou do for the child in this kind? I can teach my little Pearl that what I have learned from this, answered Hester Prynne, laying her finger on the red token. Woman, she said, I can tell her everything I've learned from this. Like, don't live the life I live because I have to deal with this humiliation. It says, woman, that is thy badge of shame. You can't turn it into a teaching tool. It has to be nothing but shame. You can't have it pull some certain double duty. It can't be a teachable moment. It just has to be shame and shame alone, okay? Because if you switch the meaning of this particular thing that we're making you wear, if we switch that, then it no longer has the power that we want it to have over you. So you've got to use it the way we think you should. All right. So, woman, it is thy badge of shame, replied the stern magistrate. It is because of the stain which that letter indicates that we would transfer the child to other hands. It's for that very reason. Nevertheless, said the mother calmly, though growing more pale, this badge hath taught me. It daily teaches me. It is teaching me at this moment. Lessons whereof my child may be the wiser and better, albeit they can profit nothing to myself. Like I've already messed up. But if I can use this to teach my child, then there's a benefit. All right. We will judge warily, said Billingham, and look well that we are what we are about to do. Good Master Wilson, I pray you, examine this Pearl, since it is her name, and see whether she hath had such Christian nurture as benefits a child of her age. Okay, test her. See if she knows her Christianity very well. Okay. The old minister seated himself in an armchair. I like this, it's kind of funny. And made an effort to draw Pearl betwixt his knees, but the child, unaccustomed to the touch or familiarity of any but her mother, escaped through the open window and stood on the upper step, looking like a wild tropical bird of rich plumage, ready to take flight into the upper air. Mr. Wilson, not a little astonished at this outbreak, for he was a grandfatherly sort of personage and usually a vast favorite with children, essayed, however, to proceed with the examination. Pearl, said he, with great solemnity, thou must take heed to instruction, that so in due season thou mayest wear in thy bosom the pearl of great price, from the scriptures. Okay, canst thou tell me, my child, who made thee? Now Pearl Pearl knew well enough who made her, for Hester Prynne, the daughter of a pious home, very soon after her talk with the child about her heavenly Father, had begun to inform her of those truths which the human spirit, at whatever stage of immaturity, imbibes such eager interest. So Pearl knew all about this religious stuff. It wasn't new information to her, right? Skipping a few sentences, it says, but that perversity, which all children have more or less of, and of which little Pearl had tenfold portion, okay, all kids are kind of mischievous, but Pearl, very mischievous. Now, at that moment, inopportune moment, took thorough possession of her and closed her lips and or impelled her to speak words amiss. So she was just like, I'm not going to talk, and if I do, it's not going to answer your questions directly. All right. We see here one paragraph begins, then in the midst of all this, old Roger Chillingworth, with a smile on his face, whispered something in the young clergyman's ear. Wonder what's going on there. But obviously showing a familiarity between the two. All right. Hester doesn't like that either. Hester takes sort of like, what's going on here? What's this all about? All right. I'm going to go to this paragraph. This is awful, cried the governor, slowly recovering from his astonishment, into which Pearl response had thrown him. Here's a child of 3 years old, and she cannot tell who made her? Without question, she is equally in the dark as to her soul, its present depravity, and future destiny. Methinks, gentlemen, we need inquire no further. This child does not know who made her. This child does not know how depraved and awful and sinful she is, and she has no idea about her eternal life and the destiny in the pits of hell, as it were. Okay. Well, Hester says, well, God gave me the child, cried she. He gave her in requital of all things else, which ye had taken from me. So who are you to take this child from me when God saw fit to give me this child in the first place? He gave this child to me because you all have taken everything else from me. All right. She is my happiness. She is my torture. That's pretty much having children in a nutshell. They are your happiness and their absolute torture at the same time. Oh, my goodness. Okay, anyway. Nonetheless, okay, Pearl keeps me here in life. Pearl punishes me too. See ye not, she is the Scarlet Letter, only capable of being loved, and so endowed with a millionfold the power of retribution for my sin? Ye shall not take her. I will die first. God gave her into my keeping, repeated Hester Prynne, raising her voice almost to a shriek. Impassioned, isn't she? All right. I will not give her up. And here, by a sudden impulse, she turned to the young clergyman, Mr. Dimmesdale, at whom, up to this moment, she had seemed hardly so much as once to direct her eyes. Speak thou for me, she cried. Thou wast my pastor, and hast charge of my soul, and knowest me better than these men can. I will not lose the child. Speak for me. Thou knowest, for thou hast sympathies which these men lack. Thou knowest what is in my heart, and what are a mother's rights, and how much the stronger they are when that mother has but her child and the Scarlet Letter. Look down to it. I will not lose my child. Look to it. All right. Going to him saying, you are my pastor. You are my spiritual advisor. You know me better than anybody else. Come on. Why am I not hearing from you? Help me out. Skipping a paragraph, he says, though, there is truth in what she says. Truth in what Hester says. And in the feeling which inspires her. God gave her the child and gave her too an instinctive knowledge of its nature and requirements, both seemingly so peculiar, which no other mortal being can possess. And moreover, is there not a quality of awful sacredness in the relation between this mother and this child? Okay, looking on a little bit, it says, for if we deem it otherwise, we do not thereby say that the Heavenly Father, the Creator of all flesh, hath lightly recognized the deed of sin and made of no account the distinction between unhallowed lust and holy love. This child is its father's guilt, okay, and its mother's shame hath come from the hand of God to work in many ways upon her heart, who pleads so earnestly and with such bitterness of spirit the right to keep her. Interesting, he brings up the father. It's the father's guilt. The child is a representation of the father's guilt and of, what does he say? The mother's shame. All right. Skipping down to the paragraph where it says, "Oh no, not so." Okay. About midway through that, it says, "Therefore it is good for this poor sinful woman that she hath an infant immortality, being capable of eternal joy or sorrow, confided to her care, to be trained up by her righteousness, to remind her at every moment of her fall, but yet to teach her, as it were, by the Creator's sacred pledge, that if she bring the child to heaven, the child also will bring its parent thither. Herein is the sinful mother happier than the sinful father." All right. She's happier than whoever that father is, because she is the one that gets to instruct this child and try to bring up this child and make up for the sin that caused this child in the first place. But the father is nowhere to be found. All right. So actually she is in better shape than the father. All right. And then we see, as we're closing out and she's leaving with Pearl, she's run up against this person, Mistress Hibbins. And Mistress Hibbins was known and believed to be and known to be a witch. And she actually offers for Pearl or for Hester to accompany her out in the woods with the witches. And Hester declines. All right, so there we go. All right. That's where I'm going to leave this. There was a lot to that, and I read a lot, but I think a lot of that was important stuff to understand this relationship and understand how these men, all men, trying to determine what is the proper way for Hester and Pearl to, live out their lives together. All right. Dimmesdale to the rescue. All right. Dimmesdale also saying that, yes, there is a father, obviously. All right. And that guy bears some responsibility too. But in bearing that, in not living out that responsibility is a lot of his guilt and a lot of his shame. All right. He's missing out. Okay. So leave it there. All right. Here we go with the Leech. All right. Now the Leech here, I don't think it's going to surprise you a whole lot. It's going to focus on Roger Chillingworth. All right. And as we know, it starts off, this particular chapter starts off indicating that, yes, Roger Chillingworth was once the husband of Hester. And when he returned, he, was surprised to see whom, the person that he had hoped to have, relationship with, or that he had thought would be his wife, that would be, the home maker, I guess, for lack of better terms, and whatnot, standing in front of everybody else, being ridiculed for having adultery and having this child without a husband. All right. And it's interesting, midway through that first paragraph, where it says, "Then why? Since the choice was with himself," since the choice was with himself, "should the individual whose connection with the fallen woman had been the most intimate and sacred of them all come forward to vindicate his claim to an inheritance so little desirable?" All right. Remember, no one knows yet who Pearl's father is. And, it's like, okay, who is this man? Well, it's not like he's going to go, "Oh, it's me." Okay, seeing how they're treating Hester and putting her up there and ridiculing her. It's not like some guy's going to be like, "I did it." All right. And, as we know, that she wouldn't sell out her, Pearl's father. He resolved not to be pilloried beside her on the pedestal of shame, unknown to all but Hester Prynne, and, processing the lock and key of her silence, he chose to withdraw his name from the roll of mankind, and, as regarded his former ties and interests, to vanish out of life as completely as if he needed lay at the bottom of the ocean. Person just vanished. All right. within rumor, had long ago consigned him. This is so basically saying that people believe that her husband maybe her not husband, but Pearl's father just may as well be at the bottom of the ocean for all we know. All right. This purpose, once effected, new interest would immediately spring up, and likewise new purpose. Dark, it is true, if not guilty, but of force enough to engage the full strength of his faculties. In pursuance of this resolve, he took up his residence in the Puritan town as Roger Chillingworth. Yes, without other introduction than the learning and intelligence of which he possessed more than a common measure. As his studies, at a previous period in his life, had made him extensively acquainted with the medical science of the day, it was a physician that he presented himself. He presented himself as a doctor. So he's able, since no one knows who he is, to sort of reinvent himself and present himself as he wants to be presented. Have them see him as he wants them to see him. All right? And as such, cordially received. So people liked him, we see, at first. Okay? Skillful men of the medical and, chirurgical profession were of rare occurrence in the colony, so there weren't a whole lot of them. They seldom, it would appear, partook of the religious zeal that brought other immigrants across the Atlantic. Okay? So the men of science didn't partake in the religious zeal, so they didn't find a need to go to the New World because, well, they weren't big religious types to begin with. In their researches into the human frame, it may be that the higher and more subtle faculties of such men were materialized, and that they lost the spiritual view of existence amid the intricacies of that wondrous mechanism which seemed to involve art enough to comprise all life within itself. They found no need for religion because they had the sciences. Okay. Skipping down a little bit, it says, this learned stranger was exemplary as regarded at least the outward forms of religious life, and early after his arrival had chosen for his spiritual guide Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale. So he chose Dimmesdale as his own personal minister, so to speak. Okay. The young divine, whose scholar-like renown still lived in Oxford, was considered by his most fervent admirers as little less than a heaven-ordained apostle, destined, should he live and labor for the ordinary term of life, to do as great deeds for now feeble New England church as the early fathers had achieved for the infancy of the Christian faith. So Dimmesdale is who they're speaking of here, was very well regarded. Okay. About this period, however, the health of Mr. Dimmesdale had evidently begun to fail. By those best acquainted with his habits, the paleness of the young minister's cheek was accounted for by his too earnest devotion to study, his scrupulous fulfillment of parochial duty, and, more than all, by the fasts and vigils of which he made a frequent practices in order to keep the grossness of his earthly state from clogging and obscuring his spiritual lamp. Okay, so they believed he was just so devoted to his religious practice, so devoted to his religious studies, that it was just starting to wear him down. Towards the end of that paragraph, his form grew emaciated. His voice, though still rich and sweet, had a certain melancholy prophecy of decay in it. He was often observed on any slight alarm or other sudden accident to put his hand over his heart, with first a flush and then a paleness indicative of pain. Okay, so he's struggling physically, this Reverend Dimmesdale. We see in the next paragraph, Roger Chillingworth had an aspect of mystery, which was easily heightened to the miraculous. He was now known to be a man of skill. It was observed that he gathered herbs and the blossoms of wildflowers, and dug up roots and plucked off twigs from the forest trees, like one acquainted with hidden virtues in what was valueless to the common eye. He saw things that they didn't see. He's been in the wilderness with the Native Americans. He understands things that we don't. All right? Towards the end of that paragraph, individuals of wiser faith, indeed, who knew that heaven promotes its purposes without aiming at the stage effect of what is called miraculous interposition, were inclined to see a provincial hand in Roger Chillingworth's so opportune arrival. They believed that Roger Chillingworth was almost brought there by God so he could tend to the well-being of Reverend Dimsdale. Like, how fortunate that he is here. Hang on. The idea was countenanced by the strong interest which the physician never ever manifested in the young clergyman. He attached himself to him. Okay, so Chillingworth attached himself to Dimsdale as a parishioner and sought to win friendly regard and confidence from his naturally reserved sensibility. He expressed great alarm at his pastor's state of health, but was anxious to attempt the cure, and if early undertaken, seemed not despondent of a favorable result. Okay, we'll figure this out. We'll figure out what's wrong with you, and we'll get you on the right track. The elders, the deacons, the motherly dames, and the young and fair maidens of Mr. Dimsdale flock were alike importunate that he should make trial of the physician's frankly offered skill. Mr. Dimsdale greatly repelled their entreaties. "I need no medicine," said he. All right? A man of faith saying he doesn't need medicine. They're saying, listen, he's here for a reason. Take this man up on what he is offering you. All right? Beginning with the paragraph, it says, in this manner, the mysterious old Roger Chillingworth became the medical advisor of Reverend Dimsdale. Skipping a few sentences, though it says, there was a fascination for the minister in the company of men of science. Okay, he loved to be in the company of this man of science, this man of the cloth, as they say, this spiritual leader, liked being in the presence of this man who knows the physical world. Okay. It says, in whom he recognized an intellectual cultivation of no moderate depth or scope. So game recognizes game. Different place, you in the physical arts, me in the spiritual arts, but we are both learned men. We are both intelligent men. And so I understand and want to sort of be in the presence of this mind. Okay. Together with a range and freedom of ideas that he would have vainly looked for among the members of his own profession. In truth, he was startled, if not shocked, to find this attribute in the physician. Mr. Dimsdale was a true priest, a true religionist, with a reverential sentiment largely developed, and an order of mind that impelled itself powerfully along the track of a creed, and wore its passage continually deeper with the lapse of time. All right? In no state of society would he have been what is called a man of liberal views. It would always be essential to his peace to feel the pressure of faith about him. He would be uncomfortable if he did not have his faith around him at all times, supporting, while it confined him within its iron framework. Okay. Not the less, however, though with a tremulous enjoyment, did he feel the occasional relief of looking at the universe through the medium of another kind of intellect than those with which he had habitually held converse. He wanted to see, curious to see what it was like maybe through someone else's eyes, through someone else's viewpoint. Okay, it was as if a window were thrown open, admitting a freer atmosphere into the close and stifling study, where his life was wasting itself away amid lamplight or obstructed day beams and the musty fragrance, be it sensual or moral, that exhales from books. But the air was too fresh and chilled to be long breathed with comfort. So the minister and the physician with him withdrew again within the limits of what their church defined as orthodox. So he enjoyed it as much as, being in the presence and looking through the things, the eyes of Roger Chillingworth and seeing the eyes that, the world through his eyes. but only for long enough until it got a little too uncomfortable and kind of went back to what he was comfortable with, okay? There's a sentence in the next paragraph. You know, the paragraph that begins, thus Roger Chillingworth scrutinized his patient carefully. Okay. Scrutinized his patient carefully. Interesting, all right? Interesting word there. A man burdened with a secret, he says, okay, should especially avoid the intimacy of his physician. If the latter, the physician, possess native sagacity and a nameless something more, let us call it intuition. If he show no intrusive egoism or disagreeably prominent characteristics of his own, if he have the power which must be born with him to bring his mind to such affinity with his patients, that this last shall unawares have spoken what he imagines himself only to have thought. All right, sort of implying or wondering, Dimmesdale, are you a man of secrets? Are these secrets that you're keeping that which is causing you to be physically ill? All right. The next paragraph says, Roger Chillingworth possessed all or most of the attributes above enumerated. Nevertheless, get this, time went on. A kind of intimacy, as we have said, grew up between these two cultivated minds, which had as wide a field as the whole sphere of human thought and study to meet upon. They discussed every topic of ethics and religion, of public affairs and private character. They talked much on both sides of matters that seemed personal to themselves. And yet no secret, such as the physician fancied must exist there, ever stole out of the minister's consciousness into his companion's ear. The latter had his suspicions, indeed, that even the nature of Mr. Dimmesdale's bodily disease had never fully revealed to him. It was a strange reserve, trying to figure out what is going on with this minister, what is causing him to be so ill. Okay. I'm reading now from the paragraph that says, and the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, best discerning friends. Now get this, listen to this, okay? But it must now be said, another portion of the community had latterly begun to take its own view of the relation betwixt Dimmesdale and the mysterious old physician. So not everybody is so cool with this relationship. When an uninstructed multitude attempts to see with its eyes, it is exceedingly apt to be deceived. When, however, it forms its judgment, that it usually does, on the intuitions of its great and warm heart, the conclusions thus attained are often so profound and so unerring as to possess the character of truths supernaturally revealed. The people, in the case of which we speak, could justify its prejudice against Roger Chillingworth by no fact or argument worthy of serious refutation. There was an aged handicraftsman, it is true, who had been a citizen of London at the period of Sir Thomas Overbury's murder, now some 30 years agone. He testified to having seen the physician under some other name. I recognize this guy. But he didn't go by Roger Chillingworth at the time. Okay. That's suspicious, they think. Okay. It says, which the narrator of the story has now forgotten. I don't remember what the name the guy gave, is what he's saying. In the company with Dr. Foreman, the famous old conjurer, who was implicated in the affair of Overbury. 2 or 3 individuals hinted that the man of skill during his Indian captivity had enlarged his medical attainments by joining in the incantation of savage priests, okay, witch doctory kinds of things, who were universally acknowledged to be powerful enchanters, often performing seemingly miraculous cures by their skill in the black arts. So not everybody is cool with this Chillingworth. Not everybody thinks he's good, and some people think he's not who he says he is, and some people think he's maybe practicing the dark arts. Skipping a few sentences. At first, his expression had been calm, meditative, scholar-like. Now there was something ugly and evil in his face, which they had not previously noted, and which grew still the more obvious to sight the oftener they looked upon him. According to the vulgar idea, the fire in his laboratory had been brought from the lower regions. They believed maybe the fire in his laboratory came from hell and was fed with infernal fuel. And so, as might be expected, his visage was getting sooty with the smoke. To sum up the matter, putting it bluntly, to sum up the matter, it grew to be a wide, diffused opinion that the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, like many other personage of especial sanctity in all ages of the Christian world, was haunted either by Satan himself or Satan's emissary, in the guise of old Roger Chillingworth. This diabolical agent had the divine permission for a season to burrow into the clergyman's intimacy and plot against his soul. No sensible man, it was confessed, could doubt on which side the victory would turn. The people looked with an unshaken hope to see the minister come forth out of the conflict transfigured with the glory which he would unquestionably win. Meanwhile, nevertheless, it was sad to think of the perchance mortal agony through which he must struggle towards his triumph. A lot of people believing that the devil is working and the devil has manifested itself in people. Okay? A lot of people don't trust this Chillingworth. A lot of people think that Pearl, too, is demonic in her own nature. All right? But stay tuned. We'll see if we can't get to the bottom of who these people are. All right? So, thank you for taking the time to stick with me through this. All right? The next few chapters on your own. I'll have another video hot on the heels of this one with another 3 chapters. So, until then, and as always, happy reading.